Welcome to InSEA's first webinar. InSEA, if you don't know and are not necessarily a member, you may very well be a member through your affiliate associations, particularly through Art Education Australia if you're a member with us, or an individual member or student member with InSEA. We are an official partner of UNESCO. And this is our week. This is the week that we celebrate all the things that we do interculturally, socially, politically, economically in our research and praxis. So I hope you're having a great Arts Education Week. The webinars are an hour. They're pretty short because our speakers are only going to speak for a short amount of time. But one of the things that will enable is that we are able to capture and highlight and reify something really special about each of these individuals. And the website will then contain information for you to be able to keep up to date with what they might do or what they might have spoken about. So it could include a paper, for instance. It could be a project that they might want to share on the website, and you can actually follow them up. And most of them have their information on their slides for you to contact as well. So I'm going to start by jumping to a slide, Associate Professor. From University of Southern Queensland. Margaret has played a role in InSEA in the past, has been, I think, the person who probably highlighted InSEA for me in Australia. And so I think it's really exciting that Marg, as current President of Art Education Australia, kicks us off. She was the democratic one and turned us into an alphabetical order. But it's nice that with a B, you ended up kicking us off and starting anyway. So welcome, Margaret.
Thanks so much, Kate. And hi, everyone. I hope you're having a fantastic International Arts Education Week. It's lovely to see familiar faces here, and welcome to everybody who's joined us here this morning. So through this presentation, I'll discuss how my interest in creative collaboration has informed my artistic practice, research and community initiatives. I'm really fortunate to be both a practicing visual artist and a university academic working in the field of arts education at the University of Southern Queensland, which is based in Australia. And as an academic, it's really important, as we all know, that we seek opportunities to enhance our teaching, research and service aspects of the roles that we have. So I first began university teaching after 14 years as a secondary art teacher and primary art specialist. And when I first went into the university system, I was really delighted to find that academics were given 1 day a week to undertake research. But if you were working in the arts, that could include also work in the studio. And in Australia, we have the National Excellence for Research in Australia, Quality Audit for Research, and that now accepts non-traditional research outputs, which means significant exhibitions are counted as research, which is very exciting for us. So I've now been in academia for about 15 years, but listening to the chat before we all joined, I think we'd all agree that work as an educator, it's difficult to balance at times with an art practice. So my doctorate, completed in 2007, brought together my artistic practice and research through the exploration of artistic collaboration. And that's enabled me to explore the complex concept of collaboration through the work of artists who publicly acknowledge joint or multiple authorship of their work. And I realised that this desire to understand and contextualise such a complex process as collaboration has been drawn through my arts practice, because I often emphasise form and structure, the use of transparency and reflection to show surfaces that may be hidden. And my most recent exhibition, which was Australia Council for the Arts funded, is titled, and the exhibition's titled Dark Rituals, Magical Relics from the Little Spellbook, brought together a number of contemporary women artists. It's been curated by Associate Professor Beata Batorowicz, who's at USQ, and Megan Williams, who's at the University of the Sunshine Coast. And the first image on this slide is of my artwork in that exhibition called Holy Smoke and Mirrors. And there's text under the chairs that you can see at particular angles as you walk around. So that just emphasises to me about form and structure. The chairs aren't put together with nails, they're slotted together so that you can see exactly how this piece comes together. So I really love the way that that informs my practice, that the concept of collaboration in that structure. And this was recently exhibited at 10 Days on the Island in Tasmania, and it will be travelling to Canada next, so that's really exciting. So on the next slide, one of the significant findings of my doctorate was the notion of the third entity, which arises from a true collaboration. And this can be the resultant process or product of a collaboration, and it becomes more important than the participants themselves, and something that can be brought into existence and stand alone. So a number of the community initiatives that we're involved in really show that true collaboration because of that aspect. In 2017, I was elected President of Art Education Australia, along with a fantastic group of people, many of whom are here today. And thank you for what you've done for the association. It's fantastic. The key drivers of our strategic plan are advocacy, collaboration, and community, and that fits really well with my academic role. And in the executive, we're involved in a range of initiatives which combine these key drivers and which are also informed by research and best practice. And these include art education kits that we distribute online and work with different organisations to do that. And they've also been endorsed by Professor John O'Toole, who's the lead writer for the Australian Curriculum, the Arts. So gives it that really lovely gravitas as well, and that rigour and that confidence for teachers to see how we've aligned this to the Australian curriculum. So I was really pleased. So it all came together in the Dark Rituals Magical Relics one, because that's based on the exhibition and we did the education kit for it. So I think that's a lovely way of bringing those strengths together. And these are, I've just put the link there, they're available on our website and freely available to AEA members as well. And then to just build on that, because an important part of what we do is scaffolding on what we do as well and building that narrative. We also wrote an article about that whole collaborative process to do with the Hadley's Art Prize Hobart. And that's a really prestigious landscape prize in Australia. I think it's $100,000. It's really amazing. And the lovely curator there, Amy Jackett, worked with Abby and I to write about the process of bringing together that education kit, which was really lovely. So just in the, and we also try and include our members' artwork on the front cover of our journal, which is Australian Art Education, which Dr. Martin Kirby will be talking about very soon. So just to the next slide, Kate. And in January, AEA was involved in the recent and very successful National Visual Art Education Conference. And I'd like to give a shout out to Anna Carrick and Mira Lambert, the education officers at the National Gallery of Australia. It was a fantastic conference. It had its theme, At the Heart, Inspiration, Bravery, Compassion and Education. And we looked at what is the heart of education. And this provided me with another opportunity to explore an important and collaborative 20+ year partnership that my university has with Flying Arts Alliance, a not-for-profit organisation that provides quality art and art education experiences to rural and remote areas in the state of Queensland. And we all work together. We've submitted a journal article about this partnership, and we're involved in a number of initiatives to benefit both organisations, including the education kit for the Queensland Regional Art Awards, which you saw on the previous slide, called Wanderlust, and that's been sent out to over 100 schools in Queensland, so that's fantastic. And in July, Dr. Kirby, who's also part of AEA, and I will be travelling to Vancouver in Canada for the InSEA World Congress, where we're presenting a paper titled Making a Space and Place for Art in an Academic Identity. I think that's something that we all would find dear to our heart, with a particular focus on a key exhibition that he curated and will be discussing, involving a number of academics who are also artists. And through that paper presentation, we'll explore strategies for negotiating the artist-academic hybrid identity in the academy and maintaining a sense of wholeness in the process, which I think is just really, really important and something that I've really tried to do in my academic role. Okay, Kate, I tried to keep it to 6 minutes, so I'll hand it over.
That was amazing. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you, Kate.
You have set the bar high for all following global InSEA speakers, I think.
Oh, that's very kind.
Amazing work. Thank you, Margaret. Linda.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. So my name is Linda Clark. I'm a practice-led researcher from Queensland, Australia, and I work predominantly as a visual artist through installation, video and sculpture. And I'm speaking from the perspective of a practicing artist and a tertiary educator. Currently, I'm completing examination of the new Doctor of Creative Arts. As I said, it's a new program here at the University of Southern Queensland, USQ for short, and I'm the first person to complete the DCA. I was also a recipient of the Australian Postgraduate Award Scholarship, so it's now known as the Research Training Program, which is a 3-year stipend that I received after a very competitive and stringent application process. So this definitely shows USQ's recognition of the importance of arts-based research. And the USQ Doctor of Creative Arts provided the opportunity for me to further develop my practice-focused research through visual arts praxis and exegesis as well. So currently I'm also the Secretary for Australian Art Education, and I'm providing administrative support as well as my perspective as a recent doctoral researcher, a visual arts practitioner and emerging academic in the university space. So this image on the slide is an example of my installation work that I produced through my research. If we could go to the next slide, please, Kate. Thank you. So my Doctor of Creative Arts research project is titled The Mother Artist Model, Transforming Maternal Regionalism Through Art Practice and Creative Communities. So coming from a position of being a mother and a contemporary artist researcher within a regional university setting, this practice-led project asserted that my mother and artist identities are interwoven in my life and also my art practice. So drawing on this very personal experience of blurring art and life, my project examined how the role of the mother and artist is seen in the context of the mother-child dynamic. So central to that inquiry was my development of, and what I refer to as, the mother-artist model. And this model served as a resource for approaches to creativity and art making that is actually mother artist and child focused. So my model sought to respond to a lack of conceptualizing of the mother artist relationship, whereby my own engagement between myself and my children was a central catalyst for creative exchange and forms of methodology for my art practice. So therefore, the mother artist model acted as the intersection between the creative practice component, which was 70%, and the exegetical component of my study. And I think the model's uniqueness lies in embracing an authentic mother artist experience within that shifting and complex mother-child interrelationship, and it's as a sustainable approach to contemporary art practice. So through the mother artist model, I produce artwork that renders that authentic and intersubjective relationship that I have with my children, renders that visible. So through practice-led research and autoethnographic and collective autoethnographic inquiry, the project also examined how the mother artist model was utilised by 5 Australian and international mother artist research participants. So through the model, we all utilise that universal experience of the mother-child relationship as subject matter to facilitate practice and to reduce isolation for regional mother artists. And this image that's on the slide, it shows my installation works that resulted also from the Mother Artist Model project. The next slide, please, Kate. So the research outcomes from the study include a network of regional mother artists that were making art from motherhood, not just about motherhood, within their praxis. So the project, it also offered a methodological research contribution, so adding to the legitimacy of practice-led research within academic contexts. And the Mother Artist Model research project culminated in the exhibition Tethered, Embodying the Mother Artist Model, with some of the research participants' works depicted here in these images on the slide. The work displayed here is the result of the research participants' experience of the model within their own practice. So as well, I have also participated in the industry outcome, Dark Rituals, Magical Relics from the Little Art Spellbook with Margaret. And it's an exhibition which combined an inter-university collaboration between practicing artists, academics, and doctoral candidates from the University of Saskatchewan, Canada, the University of Sunshine Coast, Australia, and the University of Southern Queensland, Australia, as well as it included internationally renowned artist Lisa Rahana, who was the 2017 New Zealand Venice Biennale representative. So we were in the same company. And the installation work at the bottom of this slide is my work Bearing Witness 2018, which was created for Dark Rituals, utilising my mother artist model. And that was important for me to undertake the DCA program because it enabled me to further develop and extend on my practice through research of my model. And if other artists and art educators wish to push their practice-led research to a new level where it positively impacts others, I would encourage you to study a similar program in your own country. And thank you for listening.
Fantastic, Linda. Thank you very much. Martin, welcome.
Thank you very much. My name's Martin Kirby. I'm a senior lecturer in curriculum and pedagogy at the University of Southern Queensland. That's my job, but my passion is being editor of Australian Art Education, the online journal of Art Education Australia. I'm one of those researchers who find the stories that researchers tell sometimes even more interesting than the research they're conducting. My preferred methodology is biography. And over time, I've shifted into an exploration of the intersection between history and art. And I began that journey firmly established in the history side of that connection. And then bit by bit, I feel that I've drifted more toward the art and the art education. So in that sense, I don't see myself having been seduced to the dark side. But I'd like to think that I can draw from both of those disciplines. My educational background after school was a Bachelor of Arts initially, and then teacher training. And from there, I spent 22 years in Australian schools, one a small Catholic girls' school, and the other a much larger Christian Brothers College, where I first worked as an English history teacher before moving into the library and into the school museum, not as an artifact, but as the person actually establishing it. And we were committed to a process of building a school and a culture that the rugby team could be proud of. But certainly while there, I was exposed to this connection between art and history. And that really was courtesy of two major grants, one from the Queensland government and one from the Australian government. There was an enormous range of funding available as a result of the centenary of the First World War. And this is where this shift into art and history paid considerable dividends, not just in terms of the grants themselves, but in terms of career development, because we were dealing with a conservative mythology, of course, Australia and war, but we were looking at it through a progressive lens. So I'd like to think one of the reasons we were successful in two of those very competitive grants was that we offered something a little bit different. We shifted a conservative methodology out of perhaps its comfort zone. And I think we drew in some arts practitioners who might, in other circumstances, have found participating in a commemoration of a centenary of the First World War not something they would traditionally have been drawn to. Part of that project, as you can see here in this slide, was a sound and light show on the front of the building at Nudgee College. It was built in 1891. It's got a very Italian sensibility for an Irish Christian Brothers school. But that was the culmination of 6 months of artistic collaboration, which had me as the program director, as numero uno or more likely a first among equals, I think, where we had the sound and light show on the front lawn. We had a music production. The orchestra was there, was to the left. We had dioramas in the school museums. We had tapestries and embroideries based on the Bayeux tapestry. We had the sound and light show, and we had a children's picture book as well. So not only was that an investigation of the history and through an artistic lens, but it was also a very much an exposure to the nature and the complexity and the richness of collaboration, because I was dealing with illustrators, artists, diorama makers, musicians, technical people in terms of the sound and light show, and publishers. And as a shout out to the musicians amongst us, I found the practitioners who most instinctively gave themselves over to collaboration were actually the musicians, which was an interesting experience in itself. So if we could just go on to the second slide, please, Kate. Now, having had that experience of artistic collaboration and exploring that intersection between art and history, I moved into the university sector in curriculum and pedagogy, but of course, I was still very much involved in research in this area between art and history. And I see it very much like the old Venn diagram we used to look at school, where we had two bodies of knowledge and there was that intersection in the middle, and it was a matter of identifying and making use of that intersection. So I curated an exhibition at the Toowoomba Regional Art Gallery called Landscape and Memory, looking at Frank Hurley and A Nation Imagined. Frank Hurley, of course, among other things, was our most famous war photographer, and his images of the Western Front in 1917 are the Western Front for Australian audiences. It's been through his photographs that our imagining of the First World War has evolved. And interestingly, in that exhibition, I drew together a whole range of artists, and this is a collection of them, who looked at the iconic images that Frank Hurley had taken, and they had interpreted them through their particular media. Having come to art through history, in my early days, I had to be reminded constantly that art didn't begin and end with painting. Whenever anyone spoke about art, I tended to think painting, and then it was brought to my attention, sometimes politely, sometimes less so, that in fact there was a world of artistic expression beyond that. I spent a lot of time in the major galleries around the world through my job, and I often walked slowly from the Renaissance through to 1923, I think, when Monet died, and then I tended to jog through the contemporary art to find the exit. But now I spend an equal time looking at the different periods and the different types of art. And as we see here, of course, there, even in this limited photograph of the exhibition, we see a broadness in those categories. So if we could just move to the next slide. Thank you. And now, as the editor of Australian Art Education, my exposure to artistic expression is even broader again. It's been an exciting job. I've edited that. I've written for it as well. I've worked closely with the typesetter and worked with a wonderful executive who've been very supportive. And we've established that as one of the premier art education journals, and certainly in the Southern Hemisphere. So as a shout out to our listeners, we release 3 issues a year. Some can be academic articles or artist essays or practical or professional artists, because of course we're operating in that space where where our demographic are artists and art educators and everything in between. So it's an exciting time for Australian art education, and certainly it's led to a further broadening of my research interests, which have covered a wonderful space between children's picture books, war artists, arts curriculum, arts practice, and the nature of collaboration. And with Associate Professor Margaret Baguli, I'm off to Princeton in January next year to research the work of Mary Shepard, the illustrator of the Mary Poppins books. So certainly the young man who began a study of history in 1987 at the University of Queensland certainly very different interests than I think I had then, a much broader sense of what history is, but certainly through that, what art and art education is all about. Thank you very much. And for those interested in writing with us, certainly stay in touch. Back to you, Kate.
Fantastic, thank you. And I don't know whether that exclamation mark is on purpose, but I quite like it.
That exclamation mark, interestingly, and then I say this in all humility, was my name and my perhaps my email address there as well. So it's disappeared. Or no, in fact, no, I'm sorry, it wasn't. It's actually the cover for the next article, which is under wraps at the moment.
Well, I love it. You've now covered it up, and if you don't go back to the website, you will not find out what is on the cover.
And just as a hint for people who like Game of Thrones type spoilers, National Gallery. There's a connection and a collaboration with them that we're making use of. Thank you.
Thank you. Abby, good morning.
Hello. Apologies if you hear my tummy growling while I speak. I neglected to have breakfast and I'm regretting that now. So that's what I'll be doing after this. So I'm just going to crack straight into this. And I'd just like to start first with my acknowledgement and something that guides me in my practice around Australian art teachers recognise the reconciliation journey as integral to all aspects of art teachers' work in education contexts. We keep at the fore of our practice the need to embody mindful, relational, inclusive and culturally appropriate approaches to art teaching, learning and making with our students. I acknowledge the Palawa people of Lutruwita, where I live and work, and recognise the strength, resilience and capacity of Aboriginal people, the first teachers, artists and storytellers. And so on that, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about some work that has grown from my PhD study, which is a few years back now. It's a process, it continues, and they are called relational art inquiry tools. So what are they and what do they do? And the work that I'm going to share with you, there are 4 journal articles that these are embedded in. So at a later point, I'll be able to refer people to those of you interested to find out a bit more. So the conceptualisation of relational art inquiry as a tool was developed in collaboration between a range of different researchers and continues to develop as a result of emerging concerns regarding the transferability, appropriateness and adaptability of artography for non-arts contexts and collaborating with people. So a part of my PhD inquiry, I used artography methodology, I love it, and was always sort of championing how other people could use that. And it was seen as necessary to counter some of the challenges associated with implementing artography with non-arts background participants. And that's been reported on by a few people, Kind, Levy, and others. So it's a wondering about how others who may not have those, they might have an aversion to arts, for example, or be resistant. How can we include them in this process, in this wonderful methodology? And I like to, when I say RATE, that's the acronym for Relational Art Inquiry Tool. So primarily the RATE and its accompanying support tools were designed to support individual and or collaborative inquiry that positions us to employ the propensities and processes inherent to art making, to research and teaching within artographic inquiry. So for me, these are the most exciting aspects of any arts-based inquiry, where I'm able to draw researchers into the guts of my process, illustrating how particular interpretations and understandings can be obtained through relational practices inherent to art, research and teaching. So RATE have enabled me to articulate and work from the interrelationship between artist practice, research and pedagogy to collaborate with people from a wide range of disciplinary backgrounds and interests and a range of different problems. Next slide, please, Kate. So you might see how I just emphasised guts before. So I'm going to tell you a bit more about the guts on this screen. So these are 2 examples of arts inquiry that I've been working on the last 2 years. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about there. And so the top row is consumed by consumption and the bottom row is vascular rhythms. So for consumed by consumption, my inquiry drew from a diverse range of perspectives. I collected anecdotal accounts from family and childhood friends who have experienced poor mental health. I talked to spiritual practitioners who described the criticality of their maintaining a healthy gut microbiome in order to achieve optimum clarity for their work as healers. I talked to UTAS human life science research colleagues who generously pointed me in the direction of studies and researchers conducting remarkable explorations into the gut-brain axis and how the gastrointestinal tract might influence human mood and other behavioural disorders. So this is me coming into a space that I know nothing about, other than I have had some gut issues. I know others who've had gut issues, and I was really curious about all of the different things that people know about that from different perspectives. So I use these rate tools as a means for interfacing arts and non-arts perspectives through a process of relational meaning making to achieve an arts-based outcome. And I continue to refer to this process and product, this consumed by consumption body of work, to encourage consideration for how the foods we consume might contribute to cultivating particular states of mental health. So it now operates as a sort of point for a whole range of really wild and wonderful conversations, all achieved through the relational art inquiry tool. So now if I were to look at vascular rhythms, these artworks were developed with rate tools for an exhibition brief for the Monophoma Festival in Tasmania, Australia this year in January. So the exhibition brief was Art of the Body and involved the artist encountering a collection of human specimens, all of which presented with a variety of diseases. So for me, with a family history of heart disease, stroke and emphysema, things might look a bit grim in my future, I was drawn to the collection of lungs in this big range of specimens. Particularly, there was one that had emphysema and another that had an aneurysm. And I was really struck by the aesthetic synergy between the vasculature of the lungs and the branch architecture of trees, specifically cytogums, which I'd been looking at as part of my conservation volunteer work with the Tasmanian Land Conservancy. So I was sort of drawing together the perspectives and my own experiences. There's really disparate things through these relational art inquiry tools. So the tree lung rhizome embodies a principle of connectivity, assisting how we might perceive resonance between seemingly conflicting inside and outside bodies. The lung tree rhizomes are innately creative in their capacity to enact visual, aesthetic harmonies and synthesis, compelling us to de-stratify our ways of thinking. So in developing this work, I employed questions within and from the tools to elicit insight from scientists working in our School of Medicine and environmental ecologists. Next slide, please, Kate. So last one here, two further examples here that I've used, that I have employed the rate. So more so now with the other co-researchers. So I take a back seat and let them drive the rate bus. So these are with two health and education researchers inquiring into two different contexts, one being pastoral care and boarding school in Tasmania, and another looking at elite swimming culture. So two things that were really quite, again, outside of my zone, apart from the boarding school one, having worked there, but definitely the elite swimming culture was way outside of my field of knowledge. But the tools enabled us to critically analyse and determine how these kind of interfacing mechanisms could support a participant from a non-arts background within the context of exercise and sport to engage in and with artography. And there was a lot of resistance and aversion to, what is this artography business that you are trying to, get me to do with you? So the tools themselves enable me, together we would work through those perceptions and assumptions, and we were able to get a sense of the degree to which these tools assisted learning and understanding of the damaging body practices that have become normalised in Australian swimming culture. The example on the left of the armchair is from an outcome of another research collaboration where I supported my co-researcher to articulate the experience of living and working in a Tasmanian boarding school as told in relation to a sequence of interrelated journeys that intersect and unfold around a domestic object, specifically this wing chair that had been passed down through 3 generations of boarding house students, tutors and housemasters. So here, it's a very short snippet. I've actually given you very little information about, so what is this tool? So therefore you are now going to need to go and look at some of these journal articles in which they are broken down, and all of the theory that is embedded within those is laid out for you to make sense of. So rate tools can be applied, in closing, to guide non-arts background researchers and participants, as well as those already acquainted in a process of ongoing critical and relational reflection, to engage and create an artistic process and response for the purposes of inquiry. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you very much. And we'll make sure we have those links up when this video is published as well, Abby.
Thanks, Kate.
So that everyone can get in and read about your rate bus.
Yeah.
Welcome, Sue. Oh, you're still muted. Hang on, let me unmute you. Unmute.
I'm unmuted now.
Now you're good.
I'm Sue Pavlovich. I currently teach as an art teacher at Horsham College in regional Victoria, almost remote Victoria. Now, the work I'm going to discuss, I'll start with Touch Invokes Memory, which begins a kind of formal exploration with relational aesthetics, which have interested me in an exhibition and gallery context for quite a long time, in fact, lifelong, except relational aesthetics as a conceptual frameworks, especially referencing Baudrillard, matches my intentions in the work. Now, these people who are drawing in this image are actually drawing tiny bits of beautiful stone. Now, I provoked people by immersing them in a room full of beautiful stones, which I'm not showing right now, but which I will be linking in my links on Instagram and Facebook. So if you want to go for a further look back into those within a day. Now, this particular work tied in with my Masters in Visual Arts that I obtained from Monash in 2014. This was at the same time as I moved to Horsham to teach at Horsham College. This inquiry developed into a much broader one on relational aesthetics. If I could have the next slide, please. Sensorium was something that I developed post my studies when there wasn't an external rigor from someone else, but taking those ideas into community and into other relevant activities within a regional or rural community while participating in the mainstream of art practice. This is exhibited at the Goat Gallery, which is part of Arapley's Community Theatre, which is a Creative Victoria funded space or set of ideas. Over time, I started out as a exhibiting artist within that, and now curate the Goat Gallery and now chair Arapley's Community Theatre. This then leads me to the interaction with community in my artwork immediately, children and making and pedagogy. Now, my inquiry in working with children who are within that little shroud, or old people, young people, anybody, ties in with the kind of knowledge you get as a teacher that you acquire over time, even though at some point you might do it formally. It becomes absolutely automatic and normal to tailor events and ideas which each person gets their own take from them. Now, I have a particular preference to working in artist-run initiatives through a lifelong practice with Gippsland, Arkinar, in Melbourne with 69 Smith Street, and with the GOAT, which in effect is an ARI. Now, recently I tested Sensorium number 2 at Rubicon ARI with 69 Smith Street Collective as part of a group show. What that gave me is that the work replicates across different sites and actually evokes a similar or same response as a relational piece of work. If we can have the next slide, please. I sometimes work with people who are very passive in what they do, where I ask them to just take in what there is. Now, on the other slides, I haven't added busy slides, but then people leap around, jump around, make things. And most recently, I've had children co-author the work in my most recent Sensorium, which is currently still installed at the Goat Gallery. A small boy was co-authoring a 3-year-old. They made their grandfather and mother a costume from within the actual art installation. So the participant or viewer becomes an enabled and embodied maker while participating and responding to the work I have made as a provocation. In a very simple way, in the Artists Festival coming up in a fortnight, which is an annual Wimmera-based festival, I have had a series of activities, annual activities called Walking In. And walking in the Wimmera is its overarching term, but there's walking in Laharam Grove, that's a very structured olive grove, walking in the Little Desert, which is a wild place and where you lose your sense of bearing and references. People are actually kept very safe, by the way, but it actually gives a very visceral set of experiences, and they're asked if they'd like to draw or just walk through the setting. This time I'm doing an activity walking along the in the Wimmera near the Arapiles, which is some fantastic rocky rocks in the middle of nowhere in Western Victoria. Now, my interest in art is utterly to be contemporary. I haven't got any apologies for referencing anything except the present, except my present is a long present. And I really enjoy taking my senior students along into that world. And I also really love opening the possibilities for young and old people. And I enjoy provoking inquiry in people who might then take that inquiry into the broader world. So if you would like to either participate with me or any work in Natimak, which is 320 kilometres outside of Melbourne for those outside of Australia. It is absolutely on the money and credentialed. I would be utterly delighted for any participation. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sue. And a lovely invitation to people. Welcome, Kim.
Gadigal and Vidigal people of the Eora Nation, their elders past and present, sovereignty never ceded. I'd like to talk today just a little bit about one term there, practice encounters. And I've been fiddling about with that notion of encounter for some time now. You'll see on the left there, this is a still from a video series that I did in 2013. And so alongside a lot of the speakers today, I'm very interested in co-production, co-authoring, co-working. So most of my work is in that vein. And you'll see there Vic Chapman. This is just a series of YouTube videos I did with our Director of Indigenous Programs, Tess Alice. And Vic is an elder who's an artist. He's also the first Indigenous principal in New South Wales. And so he was charged with kind of asking questions of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students regarding their educational journey, particularly in regard to visual arts. I wanted to, next slide, Kate, to talk a little bit about my practice, and so that focus on practice in terms of my teaching practice, and then the final slide will be around my interest, like some other speakers today, with regard to excuse me, exhibition practice and creative practice. So in this work that you currently see on the slide, I've produced a series of industry encounters, so working with creative industry professionals to understand what it is that they do in terms of their particularly design practice, this one was. So I've sliced together a whole series of videos where we kind of ask the same question of 9 practitioners, and then we've produced these very kind of evocative industry encounters. So the notion of encounter is really important, because an encounter can mean something coming up against something that can be hostile. And so in Australian history, the notion of the discovery of Australia and notions of discovery and the encountering of Indigenous people by the British when they arrived, for example, is an example of an encounter that is highly contested. And so it's really important to explore these notions of contestation within an understanding of a dilemmas framework. So I've chosen encounter to kind of countermand the notion of encounter and start to think about how an encounter can actually be a catalyst for a conversation, often a critical conversation, a conversation that has a dilemma involved with it. So I use these industry encounters to raise particular issues with students and talk with them about often difficult issues in a way that allows them to explore a range of really diverse perspectives. You'll see the students again on the top slide there from the Indigenous Learning Ecologies video series, and they're from a range of various nations and peoples around New South Wales. The other slide is around animated encounters. So I did a survey with students that was across our art and design faculty. And the students in first year particularly identified intellectual property as a huge issue and cultural sensitivity, one that they found difficult to deal with. So I produced a range of short animations with colleagues. We sort of interpreted the text and image from the surveys into storyboards, then into animations. So that process of kind of moving from a kind of verbal and oral tradition to a visual tradition is what I'm really interested in pursuing, and how you go about doing that. So the next slide, Kate. I'm not sure how that will show up, but anyway, on the left is one of my recent exhibition pieces, A Rather Novel Marriage, and that was created with my wonderful group of women that I work with, Sisters Holding Space, we call ourselves, and it's led by Professor Tracy Bunder. And so we did this as part of the Anywhere Festival in Brisbane. It was at Kuruldagan, the Indigenous Talking Circle space in the State Library in Queensland. And I did a kind of visual performative piece around the, text-based work there that I discovered from an ancestor that I'd been researching. So in the Sydney Morning Herald in 1848, there was a report of a marriage of an Aboriginal person, Black Harry, and this was my ancestor. And so I've taken text and just taken snippets of text as a kind of research tool to kind of, work with Aboriginal people as well, to distill these kinds of really important pieces of language that can kind of evoke and bring a kind of counter encounter, if you like, to discovery narratives. So I'm very interested in how you countermand previous history, make voices that were previously hidden available, because I don't have a history on my paternal side to actually go back to that is the Western history at all. So I have to kind of think about this otherworldliness and worldly sensibilities in terms of practice rather than a kind of Western tradition. So the other small images there I just thought I'd put in a co-author and I, Jesse Angre-Andel. He collects snippets of text as well from customers, workplaces, collects them on his phone, and he then creates artwork. So this is a children's picture book from early Australian 19th century. And he's matched these really rather horrid snippets of text that he's collected to these children's picture books. So you might see the one there where there's kind of the fish, the text accompanying that is "Abos eat them, don't they?" So he's starting to play with putting the text into the image and starting to, again, countermand, make you take time to look, to try and understand the kind of blackness and whiteness and those micro narratives of colour that are part of our history. The notion of practice encounters is one that I've explored and I'll finish on in a book that we've recently completed on community engagement, beyond community engagement. And it's the notion that I was working with Donna Mathewson-Mitchell on regarding the notion of encounter being serendipitous, full of chance, and, you just seem to come upon it. So we were playing with that notion of how important that is in visual arts and in arts-based practice, artography, but also introducing the notion of practice into there so that there's this sense of having some stability, some way of setting up the encounter so that we acknowledge that these kind of contested histories. So the notion of practice and encounter has these sort of stable dynamic and these really powerful interstitial or interrelated or interdependent or intra-actions, as Barab would call it. So I think I'll finish there because I'm just aware of the time, Kate. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kim. Just a good plug there for Art Education Australia. If you're not a member or haven't visited the website, please do. arteducation.org.au and spend some time through your membership accessing the journal. For those of you who would like to continue your kind of viewing of these webinars, they will, the next round of webinars will be done at World Council meeting. The World Council meeting for InSEA is in Vancouver. You've heard about from Margaret. Martin will also be there. Kim and I will be there. It's in the second week of July following the 6th Arts-Based Research Conference at University of British Columbia. And so we hope to hold a panel live from Vancouver on a Canadian afternoon so Australians can participate and to hear some of the kind of big stories that might be coming from there. Also to follow at InSEA_blog on Twitter and to check us out on Facebook. A massive thank you. I'm going to spend some time back in the chat after this and I'll archive the chat so that it can be put up online and we'll follow up everybody and their questions from there and enable the praxis and research space to become an active, interactive one for our members. I know that Steve and the whole committee were all committed to what that sharing and collective storying might be like. And thank you to all of the speakers today. Thank you to everyone who participated. It's such a nice thing when you run a webinar and there's a lot of people in it. I've run some and there's like only the speakers, and you know that the recording will follow, but it's always such a bizarre thing. It's nice to see all these faces. Steve, did you want to say anything before we head out and start our day and you finish yours?
Yes, just congratulations everyone. For me to be here in the US to witness your research and to listen to your presentation has been delightful. And thanks to Kate for initiating this. We've talked about it for a couple of years, and now we have evidence on the InSEA homepage. Please join InSEA, take advantage of that. This is just one of many that will be coming to the public. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Have an awesome day. Enjoy your last few days of Arts Week.